filed a historic election integrity case in the Texas Supreme Court. Wow. And she will be discussing her case and legal precedents on the impacts of all candidates in Texas. She contested the 2014 election results and evidence of election voting corruption in Travis County. She's also cited on the constitutional ballot for numbering of violations associated with electronic voting machines in Texas. And it looks like she supported her claims that Attorney Ken Paxton, I know him, office submitting amicus brief in the Texas Supreme Court. She prevailed in the Texas Supreme Court. She's a pretty active lady, huh? And the court's supported by her claims. She's given 250 presentations. This would make it 251, right? In the last 3 years. Hang on a second. You all set? Let me get, I can use this, and they know what I'm saying about. I'm going to puff you up pretty good, girl. And
watch those pronouns.
I will. Yes, I will. That's okay. We're not BC here.
Doctor.
So yeah, that's right. And it's state laws in Texas election division. She, with all her election integrity issues being reported across the state, Texans have had enough. She is a native Texan, a Republican Party precinct chair at Travis County, founder and vice president, also along with Travis County Republican Party. She's earned her PhD in physical chemistry, and I said, hey, we bond. I'm in organic chemistry. She's in physical chemistry. So I said, maybe we should talk about the Heisenberg uncertainty principles. The heck with this. You tell you all that means, but I do, right? She holds U.S. patents for those on semiconductor device technology, is co-numerous authors of numerous peer-reviewed articles. And so she also appeared in the CBS Early Show, Good Morning Austin, Roger Stone, Stone Cold Truth, and on it goes. Wow, this is really important. And she knows how to work the collectibles. We just found that out. And so she's a sister in the faith of chemistry. Well, that's always good. But she did the PCAP. I did the OCAM. Welcome, Dr. Laura Pressley. Thank you.
There we go. I'm going to stand over here so I can see a little better. Well, thank y'all. Everybody knows there's a problem with our elections in the United States, right? Yes. We got it. We understand that. What about Texas? Do we know? Yes. Do we have evidence of electronic fraud in Texas? Yes. We do. And I'm going to be at Ken Hoover's Houston chapter in November. And we're going to talk in detail about the evidence of electronic computer fraud. Let me just kind of jump to the end of the movie. They do it by precinct at the central counting station. All right? Wow. So, Stalin said it best. It doesn't matter who votes. It matters who counts the vote. So why does the media spend all day long telling us about those illegal voters? Those absentee harvested ballots? Who cares? When 95% of the vote is on a computer, and in Harris County you can push a button and 100,000 votes get changed. Who cares about the onesie-twosie illegal voters? Do you see my point? Yeah. I know we might care, but from an engineering numbers standpoint, who cares? Ken Paxton will spend all day long talking about the 500 counts of illegal voters. I've got 3 criminal complaints in his office right now that talk about tens of thousands of ballots that we believe were changed electronically, and he won't touch them. Who cares about the 500 counts, Mr. Paxton? I'm going to show you some paradigm shifts today of how this can be happening in the state of Texas and what True Texas Elections is doing about it. The key focus is it matters who and how the votes are counted. And when you hear again about illegal voters, I want you to click in your brain and say, talk to the hand. What are you doing about electronic vote counting fraud? Okay? Alrighty. In Texas, there's 3 ways that we vote. One is there's still counties, 50 or so counties that never went electronic. Did y'all know that? No. paper trail. Bell County was one of the ones that was the biggest holdout, Bell County. So you've got a paper ballot, and what happens is those ballots get scanned at Central Counting Station on a scanner. It's a computer. And the data goes on a memory card, a memory stick. Other counties went to electronic voting. Some have a paper trail now. It's called the hybrid system. And some are still completely electronic with no paper trail. All of that data goes on to a memory stick. Do you see that all of our ballots in Texas end up on a memory stick? And where does that go? Where does that go? That goes down, all those memory sticks go down to the Central Counting Station in each county. And there's one in each county in Texas. And it looks like this, where there's a main computer, and all these memory sticks go into this main computer. And you get to have, in Texas, we have the best laws in the country about watchers that can watch the count, where Stalin said it matters. Well, guess what? In the last 7 years, we have put, through Texas elections, we appoint and train watchers across the state of Texas. And we have been at the Central Counting Stations. Never before had that happened prior to 2016. And what I'm going to show you is the evidence of the fraud that we are seeing. Because we are witnesses now at the counting stations. We don't train people to be at the polls, because Stalin said it doesn't matter who votes. It matters who counts. This is a paradigm shift, okay? So the Central Counting Station is a very important location. Now the fraud, the computer fraud, can go on in two different locations. It can go on at the polls, on the computers at the polls. Anything that's got a computer chip or accepts a memory stick can be a source of the fraud. Or it can just happen directly at the Central Counting Station. So let me ask you, if you were the hacker, would you, let's say Harris County, 1,000 precincts. Would you want to be at the polls hacking at those 1,000 precincts? Or would you want to be at the one Central Count Station with everything coming to you? Central Count. That's the efficient way to do it. If I were a hacker, that's where I'd want to be. I wouldn't have to, I don't want to worry about it, making thousands of memory sticks with a program on them and loading them on those machines, because I can make a mistake and I might get caught. But if I'm at the Central Count, one location, man, great work if you can get it as a hacker. Okay, that's the preferred location. I'm not saying it couldn't happen at the polls too, but you tell me the probability. Alrighty, so, is there evidence of computer fraud in Texas? The answer is yes. And it's targeted by precinct. I believe with evidence that it's targeted at Central Count. And at Ken's meeting in Harris County in Houston, I'll be going through all those details. We didn't really have time here. But I know everybody in here believes there is a problem. Now, what I want to do is, now that we understand and we agree there's a problem with the electronic count, why aren't those backup records that are legislated by the Texas legislature and the election code not being saved so that we can catch the fraud? I mean, think about Moses. He got brought up earlier. There are 3 commandments against election fraud. Do not steal, do not lie, and do not covet. 3 commandments on election fraud.
Wow.
We're not going to prevent it 100%. My hope is that we would have records that we could detect it so that candidates and voters can prove the fraud in a court of law. The laws are there. We can spend a lot of effort changing the laws, which we do. But if the laws aren't being followed, what do we do? What if the laws are there? What do we do with that? I'm going to show you, because that's where we are in Texas. The laws are there. The backup records are not being retained by the counties. Thus, fraud can waltz across Texas. All right, backup records. Let's talk about the backup records for elections. The election code is over 250 chapters. I'm going to give you the 3 things that matter most. Out of the thousands of things that could happen in election fraud, I'm going to tell you the 3 things that matter. And it's not illegal voters. It's not. The first thing is you have to have a legal ballot for a recount. Does everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. That's the number one thing that candidates go to if they think there's fraud. Now there's a law, and we're going to go through it. These ballots have to be consecutively numbered, just like your checkbook, so that you can track and trace if ballots are lost or duplicated or counterfeited, okay? The second backup record, anybody here been election judge? Raise your hand. Okay. Are these unofficial precinct returns that these tapes for these voting machines are supposed to be printed at the polls before the memory cards go down to the central count. They're supposed to have unofficial election returns used to audit if there's a problem. Candidates use these in contests. The last one is very interesting. The main computer, where all the stuff is tabulated and counted where Stalin said it matters, there's an audit log, a time date stamp on that main computer of everything that's happened. By law, all of these records have to be there in an election. Let's walk through these and see if they exist in Texas. Let's see how we're doing. Legal ballot. The first thing the state constitution says about ballots, this one happened in the 1800s, the ballots shall be numbered and the legislature shall provide for numbering of tickets. Tickets in the 1800s meant ballots. So the legislature did their job. They put it in place. The ballot shall. Is that discretionary? No, it's not. It means to do it, right? Lawyers in the room, shall is pretty good, pretty important. Shall be numbered consecutively beginning with 1. Just like your checkbook. If you start with 1, 0001, and you go from there. This is a law, been on the books for over 100 years.
Ooh.
Over 100 years in the state of Texas. Whether you have a paper ballot or whether you have a hybrid voting system ballot, which means a paper ballot that you get marked on with a little computer, shall be numbered consecutively. Well, what's happened is the Texas Secretary of State has given an advisory of how the counties can meet that criteria. Well, it seems pretty clear to me, consecutively started by 1. Isn't that what it said?
That's what it said.
That's what it said. But guess what? The Secretary of State says you can do that, or you can do something else. You can let that computer that's recording your ballot number it for you. Randomly, a number between 0, or actually 1, and 100,000. Well, that's not consecutively numbered starting with 1. I have a problem with the computer picking my ballot number. What you're supposed to be able to do as a voter, the ballots are supposed to be numbered. On the back of the ballot, there's supposed to be the judge's signature or stamp to say that's an authenticated ballot. And they're supposed to turn these ballots over so that no one sees the number and you pick your number. That's called a secret ballot. Only you see your consecutively numbered ballot. Well, now the Secretary of State, let's go back, says, oh, we can let a computer number it for you. Do you think that computer could save the number? Well, it has to save it because it's taking it off of a random number-generated list, right? Can't do the same number. So what happens now today, when people check in, that same computer is giving you your number. So where your voter registration is, your ballot number is stored in that same system. Well, is it possible that someone in the county might be able to access that data, and conservative voters are never on juries again? Consider that.
Ooh.
The Secretary of State has waived the ballot numbering requirement. There was such a controversy over this ballot numbering. I say this is the holy grail of election integrity. Because if the ballots are consecutively numbered, you have an election, you put all the ballots together, start with one, go all the way to 400,000, however many, and they better account for every single one of them. And there shouldn't be any duplicates. But now, with the computer numbering them, you don't have consecutive numbers. Imagine if your checkbook had random numbers in it. How would you audit your checkbook? How would you reconcile it? How would you know what numbers you're supposed to have? It's a disaster. So, in Hood County, which is Granbury, Texas, the County Commissioners Court did a resolution and told the election administrator, we want you to consecutively number the ballots. You have a choice from the Secretary of State to do either one. The Commissioners Court told the election administrator, consecutively number it, and she refused. Wow, this is the hill they're dying on, because it's the nerve. This is the holy grail of election integrity. This is it, guys. The number one thing in a recount, for them to track and trace where every ballot went and is. They don't want to do it. Hood County did an AG opinion request of Ken Paxton, and that's sitting on Ken's desk right now. It should come out in October. The Secretary of State is very upset about this, and we want the law followed. The law is the law is the law.
Can an election judge?
No questions. Hang on, no questions. But I'll talk to you, Rayford, after this. I'll talk to you. So, there were even 3 election lawyers that wrote a letter to the Ken Paxton and said, if you ignore the ballot consecutive law, there's 6 other laws associated with that the counties are violating. So, Mr. Paxton, please do the right thing. We'll see what Mr. Paxton does. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. So, well, guys, for the legal ballots for recounts, we don't have those. Count that out. No backup record. We don't have it. You can't get a legal recount. Number 2, official precinct returns, the tapes. We want the tapes before the equipment leaves the building and goes down and is handed off to somebody else. Okay? We want the tape. We want the judges who are in charge of that polling location to print the precinct returns. It's required by law. This is the law. The contents of envelope number 1 must contain the original election returns for the precinct. And it's a Class B misdemeanor for judges not to turn it in. So it's pretty important. This is backup record number 2 for Texas. This is what these tapes look like. They have each precinct and each candidate's votes, so that if you wanted to audit the election returns that are reported to the public, you could go back to the tapes. They're signed by the judge and they're printed. Okay? So do we have these tapes in Texas?
Yes.
No, we do not.
Do in Bell County.
Hang on. You don't have it by precinct because you're countywide. Okay? It's true. So, in Travis County, this is what started me on this path in my election in Travis County. They told the judges, do not print the tape. Do not print it. So what is the, we asked the county clerk in Travis County, why didn't you follow the law? She says, well, I don't have to follow the law. I get a dispensation from the Secretary of State. And we said, this is her testimony in our hearing. We said, do you think, this is the Travis County clerk, do you think the Secretary of State can tell you not to follow law? She said, yes. All of the county clerks and the election administrators in Texas believe I would say 99% of them believe the Secretary of State can tell them not to follow a law. We complain about the Secretary of State's in Georgia, other states. Our backyard is filthy. And so this is how the fraud can continue. The backup records aren't there. So, who's giving these waivers? Mr. Keith Ingram is the Secretary of State's Elections Director. He's been there since 2012. He's the one authorizing these waivers. $60 to 75% of people vote early, right? Now they do. What about the early vote tapes? Well, that's an interesting question. So, the Secretary of State has come out with an advisory and said, well, don't print the tapes at the polling location. Send all of the equipment down to Central Count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for 75% of the vote in Texas, we have no tapes. Even the counties are not printing them. They're not printing them. They're never printing them. When would they print them? Friday night? Tuesday, 4 days after the machines are returned? Do you see a problem with that? The judges have lost control of their records. Well, no legal ballot for a recount and no returns. You see in the picture? This is our state, guys. This is our state. Let's talk about the audit logs. Remember, the memory sticks go down to the central count station where Stalin said it matters. They go into the computer, and that computer has on that record, on the computer's hard drive, the audit log. That's supposed to record the time, date, stamp of all these activities of putting those memory sticks in the computer. There is a code that says what the audit log has to have on it. And it's there for an audit, right? It's called the audit log. I had a disagreement with the Secretary of State about 3 weeks ago. I met with him and I said, your audit log that you've authorized for the state does not meet the code. And she says, well, the audit log's not for auditing. I am not joking. This is what I was told by lawyer under Keith Ingram. It's not for auditing. And I thought I was in the Twilight Zone, guys. So I sent her a report that from 2010 that a professor at Berkeley did and said, oh, this is how you use it to audit. Okay? You got to use it to audit. I couldn't believe we're in crazy land. So this is the code. I'm not telling you anything that doesn't have a basis in law. This is the code that says what the audit log is supposed to have. The number of ballots read for a given precinct, the completion of reading the ballots, and the users logging in and out. Pretty simple. Time, date, stamp. So how does Texas fare for these audit log laws? Well, first of all, what's a precinct? Well, precinct must be compact and contiguous. Okay? It's pretty simple for a precinct, because the words in all these laws are precinct. So, let's see if the audit log is showing precincts and users logging in and out. This is an audit log from 2019 in Dallas County. This is the precinct, and the ballot's red. Check the box. It's doing its job. What about the new system? That's an old voting system in 2019. What about the new voting systems that have been approved for the state? This is one from Eastland County. It's a vendor. There's no precinct information on the log. So how can you audit the ballots at a precinct that were reported with the memory cards that came in? They're supposed to have the ballots on it. We don't have it. This is another voting system, Williamson County. Let me show you. 24,000 ballots being tabulated. No precinct information. No precinct information. You can't use it to audit anymore. This is a system from 2000. It's still being used in counties across the state. And this is, let me show you, go back one. Where is this? 1,600 ballots, 3,000 ballots, no precinct information. Well, I thought that the audit log said, let me go back to it, maybe I misread it. It says, number of ballots ready for precinct. So who's waiving this one? The Secretary of State. So, in Texas, we don't have a legal ballot, we don't have the precinct returns, and we don't have an audit log to audit. We're in big trouble. This is how the fraud can keep going on. This is shocking, guys. I don't know how the state of Texas is going to audit those 4 counties. They don't have the flipping records. We are just as in trouble as Michigan and Georgia and Arizona and the rest of them. And it's being driven by the Secretary of State, who's appointed by Greg Abbott. And we have talked to Governor Abbott. We've talked to a lot of, we'll kind of get there in a minute. Alrighty, so what's the strategy? We've got a problem. You know, we could spend all day long going down to the legislature trying to get the laws fixed, but the laws are already there. I just showed them to you. Counties aren't doing it. The Secretary of State who's advising counties is advising them to not do it. The Secretary of State who is certifying voting equipment is telling the vendors, don't worry, you don't need precinct. We got a problem. So what are we going to do about it? What we started to do is we need to focus on central count. So we have trained over watchers at the central counting station. We don't put people at the polls, we put them at the counting station. And we get that evidence. We filed it with, let's go back. We use Ken Paxton with criminal cases. And then we have civil cases that we use as evidence for. So the beginning point is the watchers at the central counting station giving us evidence of what's going on with the fraud. These are the counties in red where we have had watchers. Well, we've had watchers in all of these counties over the last several years. And in the red, we have seen counting issues. It's not just Travis. It's all over. And these are red counties too. Okay? So, the first case that was filed, and we have the lawyer in the room, Frank DeBrovlany, filed this case with 3 watchers in Dallas County who were being obstructed. I'll tell you what, if the fraud is going on in Central Count, do you think they want you there watching them? No, they don't. And it is pure hell. In Bexar County, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. Pure hell for the watchers. So bad that a case was filed in the civil court in Dallas. The watchers were not allowed to go to the bathroom, and they were told, if you go to the bathroom, we're not letting you back in. They were not allowed to sit 14 hours in Central County. Not allowed to sit. That's torture. They were not allowed to view the actions on the counting computers that were being operated. They were not allowed to review the election records being printed. They were not allowed to get a complete audit log that had the precinct information on it. This case went to the Dallas County District Court, it's a civil case, and it was challenged on standing. They don't have standing, these watchers. They don't have standing. So this case went to the appeals court in Dallas, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, kind of what happened to it. The second case, civil case, that the election watchers that we've trained have given evidence for is a $1 billion bond in Dallas County that voters can file lawsuits on bonds because we're subject to the taxes, right? So it's representation. This Dallas bond case, I am an expert, testifying expert on this case, and Hari Hursty, does anybody know Hari Hursty? Hari Hursty's world-renowned computer expert. He's the other expert on this case. Frank was on this case. We've got several other lawyers that were on it. This went to the district court, and I'm going to give you the rundown of the evidence in this case. This is more evidence than Sidney Powell ever thought about. Ever. And you've never heard about it. More than 300 precincts, 1/3 of the precincts in Dallas, had more ballots than voters that showed up to the polls. 300 precincts. I did the analysis on this. This was my role. 71,000 early vote ballots were replaced 8 days after they were downloaded to the computer. They replaced them all 8 days after the fact. 4,800 election day ballots were replaced from a source other than the polls, and it was proved in court. The tabulation computers reports didn't match. That says there's more than one set of books. There's 2 sets of books at least. We proved it in court. Dallas County used uncertified central count equipment that's supposed to be certified by SOS. They used uncertified equipment. They used uncertified and insecure data downloads for over 120,000 ballots in that election. Election day and early vote. And 2 months after this case was filed, Dallas County caused all the equipment to be destroyed. They sold it back to their vendor for $4 million, who quickly destroyed all of it. Destroyed every voting machine, every memory card, every computer, everything, every ballot scanner, every modem that was used, destroyed it 2 months after the case was filed. Now, that's pretty shocking, especially when they could have refurbished it and sold it to other customers. Are we on the nerve? We're on the nerve. The district court said all of these violations are not enough to void the election. Just not enough. Not enough. And we said there are so many error messages on the audit log that we wanted the software to go figure out why these error messages were occurring, because our expert, Hari Hursty, and their expert didn't agree on what those messages meant. And actually, that's just hearsay anyway. Those 2 experts are debating. We wanted the software who's the real witness. Right?
Right.
We don't care what one expert says or another. It's interesting. But the witness is the software. The court would not let us get it. The appeals court would not let us get it. And the Texas Supreme Court would not let the case get it. The Supreme Court basically said, go to trial without it and see if you win. Well, they didn't. They didn't win. And then the case was prevented from getting the evidence. Texas, guys, we're not talking about Michigan. We're not talking about Michigan. So, so that case is in the Dallas Appeals Court right now. So here's how the strategy works. We've got the watchers where it matters. First time in the history of Texas. And I don't know any other state in the country that has what we have right now. We've got these watchers. We are in over 36 counties. For the November 2020 election, we had 9 million voters served at Central Count. We had them covered. We used this evidence from the watchers.
That's probably appropriate.
Well, it's touching the floor, and that's not
The
good.
fight is spelled out.
I know. One thing the watchers are entitled to get when they walk out the building, many watchers stay till 2 or 4 in the morning on election night. And they get the audit logs. Even though they're incomplete and they might not have the precinct data, they are helpful. They put a stake in the ground, this many ballots were counted, so the counties can't add more later. Okay, like the other states were doing. So our watchers in November walked out of the room about 2 or 3 in the morning with the audit log that they couldn't change a number of ballots later, days after the fact.
Yeah.
So God bless those watchers. God bless them for Texas. We use that evidence in these criminal cases to Ken Paxton. We have filed a case on the 2018 primary, the 2018 November election with Ken. No action. We have filed in San Antonio similar cases of obstructions and computer fraud. The audit logs show a lot of issues they have not investigated. Travis County, we filed a case. No action. Hood County has filed this ballot numbering thing. We're waiting to see what Ken does with it. We are not happy with this. But he'll brag all day long about his 500 illegal voter cases. We're talking hundreds of thousands of ballots here. No investigation. I've never been interviewed by him, and I'm the one who did all the analysis for the cases. The third avenue that this evidence from the watchers is used is these civil cases. So the watcher obstruction case in Dallas, the bond case, and then there's a measure in Fredericksburg. What's interesting, just last night, we got word that the Supreme Court of Texas denied the watcher case. Denied it. We're going to talk about this in detail. So I just added this. I'm going to go over my time just a little bit. Just a little bit. This case was very interesting. Every one of the legal boxes for standing was checked in this watcher case. They were personally harmed. They couldn't go to the bathroom. They couldn't sit. They endured physical harm. And if you go look at the Texas Supreme Court boxes you have to check for standing, you have to have experienced particularized personal harm. And the watchers did. This case went to, after the district court said there's no standing here, the case went to the appeals court in Dallas. Does anybody know Justice Shank in Dallas? He is the Dallas Court of Appeals. He was on the panel that heard this, and it was a 2-1 decision. He was the dissenting opinion. The appeals court said the watchers don't have standing. They've not been harmed. Well, the case didn't agree with that. The lawyers didn't agree with it. Justice Shank did a dissenting opinion that was scathing and said they have standing, they meet all the criteria, etc., etc. They check the box. So legally, the box has been checked by one of the most advanced legal minds in Texas. What he did when he wrote this dissenting opinion, he just gave the case about $100,000 in free legal advice. Okay? Thank God for Justice Shank for doing the right thing. The case went to the Texas Supreme Court. The plaintiffs did a petition for review of the Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court right now. The Supreme Court got the case and said, all right, this is interesting. We want the other side, which was the Dallas County and ES&S that were named in the case. We want them to respond to the petition, so they did. This took at least one or more justices to agree for the other side to respond. The next thing that happened is once they responded, full briefing from all parties were requested, and that takes at least 4 or more justices. We don't know who, 4 or more. And then they decided last night not to take the case. This is shocking. What this means is, watchers don't have standing in Texas, even when they're physically harmed doing their job. This is absolutely shocking. I couldn't believe it. And you know, both sides probably have spent probably a couple $100,000 on each side, and for the court to just say we're not going to make a ruling is shocking. It's unacceptable. At least tell us what is wrong with the legal arguments of the watchers having standing. Tell us what's wrong with that. Tell us why ES&S in Dallas County are right. Where's a dissenting opinion on this? How come one of these people are not speaking up out of their collectivism stupor? We are due an answer on this. If this case lost on its merits, then so be it. But if you can't write an opinion that it lost, then write an opinion that it won. Pick one side. To do nothing is not an option. This is an abomination. The laws are there. The case law is there. And we can't win it in the courts. What do we do now?
Impeach.
What do we do now? Impeach who? So I'm telling you something. I want you to see this picture. This is kind of the general picture. We have three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. So where do we stand on each one of these? Let's just get to where the rubber meets the road. Well, you can forget the House and the legislature. They won't hear bills. They kill bills. Can't even get a quorum. They're out to lunch. So the Senate's all we have in the legislature. The executive branch, well, the governor appoints the Secretary of State. The governor is not getting rid of the SOS, Director of Elections. The SOS changes every couple of years, but that director is a bureaucrat, and he keeps waiving law. So get rid of the SOS. We don't have that. But what about the AG? Well, he's done some good stuff. He hasn't done any action on a couple of the cases we've done. He's got a pending case. He's iffy. He's iffy. Let's talk about the judicial branch. Well, we know district courts, appeals courts, we can't trust them. We thought we could trust the Supreme Court, but now I say no. Where are we if we don't have recourse in the courts? Where are we? We're America. No one's coming to save us. Who saved Europe in the World War II? We did. No one's coming to save us, guys. So we're it. So what is our power? First of all, you have to be in the truth, which we are. You have to have faith. You got to pray. You got to have lawsuits and with our loud voices. And I'm going to give you I'm going to give you some scriptures here. Because when we lose, when the Supreme Court decides not to take a case, when it's so strong and every legal box is checked, and just as David Shank has said it's the case in the state, and they still don't do it, all I can go is go to God. Where do I go? Proverbs 20:10 is amazing. It says, diverse weights and diverse measures, both of them are like an abomination to the Lord. The Lord is not pleased when stuff doesn't match. Psalm 146:9. The way of the wicked shall be turned upside down. I'm ready. I don't care if they are judges. I don't care if they are legislators or governors. The wicked, his word is, shall be turned upside down. And the diverse weights and measures in these elections is an abomination. Is there any disagreement that these are true? There's no disagreement these two things are true. So what do we do? I go to Corinthians on this. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. What's a stronghold? Stronghold, in a negative sense, can be fear, can be cowardice, can be corruption. That's what we're dealing with. The laws are there, people. We have the evidence. We have the cases. We have the lawyers. The courts are not giving us the justice. We have to pray for the court. We have to pray for them so they are not fearful, they're not caught up in collectivism, and they're not in a stupor that no one's watching, because we are watching. It is not acceptable to not give us an answer on this case when it is so. When elections are the most important thing in our country right now, outside of the mask and the vaccines. Okay? Why do we not have a decision? This is shocking. I need you to pray. I need you to pray for these cases. I need you to pray for these watchers. We're going to be watching in November. Can you imagine being the watchers going in with this on the books right now? Can you imagine how they're going to be treated? These guys are soldiers walking into just a disaster. So what do we do? We need more election watchers. I train them across the state. I'm doing 4 large trainings all next week. We're not giving up on these lawsuits. We're going to continue to press and file these with Ken Paxton. You can donate to help us, and we do open records requests to expose more and more. We're doing open records requests right now for the counties that are going to be doing these audits. Guys, let me tell you, they don't have the records to audit it. Don't be fooled. They're going to audit to some data set that is not the precinct results that are reported at the end that were reported in November 2020. So, anyway, I appreciate your indulgence. I know I went over. I'm here if there's any questions. I need you to pray. Thank you.